Councillors, visitors, and now please remain standing for my pastoral team, Andy Taylor, to do the prayer, and then it will be Madhu Trivedi who is going to give the thought of the day.
I'd like to just read from the scriptures from Philippians 4. Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and minds as you live in Christ Jesus. Just say that peace isn't a peace that comes from when everything's going beautifully. It's a peace that comes when everything's falling about our ears. And we should be pulling our hair out, and we're not. So let's pray. Father, we just thank you for this town. We thank you for the many people inside and outside this chamber, paid and unpaid, who put in so much time and effort to make this town a better place. We thank you, Lord, that your favour is upon this town. I do believe that's true. And Father, as the council gathers tonight to consider the local development plan, Lord, we just pray that you will guide them and direct them, perhaps giving them an insight beyond their natural to be able to see what is needed in the coming years. We pray, Lord, that everything they do will be based around righteousness, justice, compassion, faithfulness and love. We pray a blessing on this meeting tonight and everyone who takes part in it. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Andy. Mr. Trivedi. Please sit down.
I'm glad you said that. Your Worship, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, thought of the day. I would like to talk about my wonderful experience talking to the school children. Their innocent curiosity greatly touched me. I was invited by the religious school teacher to talk on Hinduism. I hope I won't bore you today. I visited over 10 schools. Most of the time, children ask me the practice of Hindu religion and festivals. Those little children wanted to know about Hindu festivals, which is always colorful and enjoyable, prayer, how we do the prayer, religion, and daily way of life in our home. I explained that family life is very important. We always respect our mom, dad, and other family members, our elders, and especially our teachers, whom we call Guru. They were surprised when I said in Hindu customs, we have Sister Day and Brothers Day. They were surprised. What happened in the month of August? Sister sent a little wristband, and thus it shows that, brother, I still love you. Doesn't matter whether you are married or not, but still they come around. And brother, if he can afford, give little coin or whatever he can. Sister Day, it comes after Diwali, following day after Diwali. And brother go to the sister's house, and sisters provide the food and enjoy it. That's the way. We also talk about yoga, meditation, how it benefits to all of us. Yoga activates blood circulation throughout the body, clean up the system, and makes a healthy body. Everybody knows it is important to have healthy body. Meditation is also important. It trains the mind to concentrate and focus to the aim of the individual. About our books, Hindu book, it's just like Bible. And this book called, we call them Gita, which teaches us about how to conduct yourself in life, your responsibility towards family, community, and mankind, environment, and most important is non-violence. I think it is a good idea if younger generation get better understanding of all religions. It would create better understanding and tolerance among people. I am glad that in this country, government started development for better understanding of all religions in schools. It is just not the children who need to understand about all of the above, but we as adults and needs to re-examine, improve, learn some the best teachings of all religions, best religion of the world to offer, and be a worthy gurus for the next generation, because we all have responsibility towards them. Thank you for inviting me.
Fire evacuation procedures. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of this room. Go down the back stairs and meet in the War Memorial Park. To receive apologies for absence. Councillor Gavin James.
Apologies for Councillor Paula Baker.
Councillor Laura James.
Apologies for Councillor Tony Jones and Councillor Gary Watts.
Thank you. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Finney and Marks. Apologies also from Councillors Cherrett, Peach, who should be here but are currently late, I'm afraid, and from Councillor Musson, who was having a scan this afternoon and was hoping to be here, but we shall see if he can get back in time. And finally, apologies from Councillor Reid, who suffered a family bereavement earlier this week and therefore is very unlikely to be with us this evening.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. Councillor Court.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 10, I'd like to declare my daughter's fiance's parents live in a tied cottage on the Manydown estate. I'm declaring this as a non-pecuniary interest and will remain in the meeting and vote.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a personal interest in sites associated with the local plan, Eli Lilly, Kiln Farm, and also not related to the local plan, but I have a personal interest in a site in East Woody. It is my intention. It's not a DPI. I'll bring it to the room's attention and we'll carry on in the meeting as such.
Councillor Rebecca Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just in the local plan. My employer, SSE plc, are mentioned. They are on my register of interest, but it's not an interest in the matter being considered tonight.
Thank you. Can I confirm the minutes of the meeting held on 11th of July 2013? And also the next ordinary meeting, that will be for the next time. Yeah. Yeah. Can I confirm those minutes? Agreed? Yeah. I beg your pardon. It will be confirmed. I withdraw that. It will be confirmed at the next meeting, which will be on the 10th of October 2013. Now, to receive any announcement from myself and the Chief Executive, I have got one. I would like to inform the Council that I have this week written to the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge at Kensington Palace on behalf of the Borough of Basingstoke and Dean to congratulate them on the birth of their son, George Alexander Louis, on the 22nd July 2013. Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also have one. Mr. Mayor, tonight's full council meeting is, as you all know, focused on the local plan, and it follows an intense period of activity, particularly by the Planning and Infrastructure OSCOM Committee. I know that we have a potentially challenging evening ahead of us, but irrespective of that, members, with your agreement, Mr. Mayor, I would just like to pay tribute to the hard work of the officers that has helped us to get to this point. I think anyone on P&I committee would recognise that. There's no doubt that, like many members, and I recognise that as well, the officers have really gone the extra mile to get us to this point. And I think particular credit ought to go to Karen, Andrew, Mark, Joe and the rest of the local plan team, but also to the people in the background, Julia and her committee services team, in ensuring that we've had all the right papers in the right place. And perhaps we'll excuse a few numbers missing off some of the pages on this occasion. I'm sure that members would agree that the officers have done really well to ensure that everything that could have been done has been done to get us to this evening's meeting. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Chairman of P&I, I would like to echo those thoughts from the Chief Executive. I think the officers did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you. We come to the next item, which is public participation. Is that a point of order or?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, sorry, just because I apologise for being late. I apologise for being late. I understand that Councillor Marks has declared that he has conflict of interest in the local development plan and that Tony Curtis has advised him he cannot attend this meeting. This is news to me, as he said on a number of occasions at public meetings in my ward, that he has no conflict of interest. So I would like the Chief Executive kindly to inform me and the rest of the Chamber as to why Councillor Marks cannot attend this meeting on the local development plan.
Chief Executive.
Mr. Mayor, that is just not true. Councillor Marks sought advice from the officers as to whether he had a conflict of interest, and we looked at the register of interests, and then we gave Councillor Marks advice, which I've given consistently to Councillor Marks, as some people in this chamber know, that I thought he probably did have an interest, but ultimately the decision on whether or not to declare an interest and whether or not to attend a meeting lies with the member. So I say as a statement of fact that I have not advised Councillor Marks that he could not attend this meeting. I advised him that ultimately it was a matter for him, but I thought on the information available to me that in all probability he did have an interest.
Thank you. Now to the next item, public participation. Councillor Phil Heath, not Councillor, Mr. Phil Heath. Mr. Heath, the questions has already been given to the portfolio holder or whoever it was concerned, and we do not need to read the question again. So would you please wait there? Councillor Ossulton is
no, Mr. Mayor. Councillor
Akers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know this question was addressed to the leader, but the leader's asked that I answer it because benefits is in my portfolio. So thank you for allowing me the opportunity to reply to this, especially now while we have a document on the council tax support out for consultation. As things currently stand, when the benefits section are notified someone has started work, the first thing we do is check whether they're entitled to an extended payment. This allows us to continue housing benefit and council tax support for a period of 4 weeks, subject to the entitlement being met, to offer some security whilst ongoing benefits are assessed. It is worth mentioning that an extension to 8 weeks is one of the things being consulted on at the moment as part of the council tax support scheme. We aim to assess new entitlement as quickly as possible so there is no adverse effect from starting work, and where appropriate we will even provisionally assess a claim based on an estimate of earnings, though each case is of course dealt with on its merits. Support is also offered through a visiting officer when we're notified, and the officer will advise them on the reassessment process and their entitlements, as well as referring them to floating support or other organisations if appropriate. What I would say, though, is that if someone is considering increasing their working hours, or if they find work, they can always use the benefit calculator on the website to at least estimate the impact of the change beforehand. The welfare reform agenda is about making work pay, and perhaps that is a change of policy to the previous government, but that does not mean the service being provided. That does mean that the service being provided is still evolving. So we now have floating support providers available at the council offices offering advice, and support and operational liaison groups are in place to ensure cross-agency support is available too. As many of you will know, we are currently recruiting 2 specialist welfare reform officers on 2-year contracts who will be instrumental in delivering a newly developed needs and support framework directly to impacted households, and then ensuring the frameworks are embedded and applied throughout the borough by existing services. This authority recognises the need to support people back into work, and we recognise the need to support people once they're back in work. It's good for their bank balance, it's good for society, and most importantly, it's good for their health and happiness. Thankfully, we now have a government and a welfare reform agenda that helps people get back into work, not one that punishes them for doing so.
Thank you. Have you got a supplementary? And that should be only for clarification on what you heard. Please.
Thank you for that reply. I think you'll find that that refers to people who are on job seekers allowance. As most people on benefit are actually on low income or part-time income, would it surprise you to learn that the response from this council and your policy, if you are going from part-time to full-time employment, is, okay, we'll stop your benefits until you can provide 5 weeks pay slips to prove that you actually deserve something? That is the response that goes to the majority of people who try to increase their hours of work. Also, you get a letter.
Question, Mr.
It's part of the question, is she surprised, that when you get a letter from the benefits office, it's a standardised letter that says, basically, there's a change of circumstance which we don't know anything about, therefore we're going to stop your benefit and you owe us benefit from previously. Now, I've been advised by the officers that this is part of the question.
Please.
That this is standard policy, and anybody who moves from low income to full employment gets that response.
All I can say is this is obviously a question on behalf of the council as a benefit paying agency, not the DWP. So if they receive something from them, I can't comment at this stage. But certainly I am informed that we will do all we can if they are still on a low income. And as I said, we will assess it on what they say might be their income without the evidence. But if they say their income's going to be X, which takes them over the threshold, then maybe the response is that they're not entitled to it. But I can assure you that officers in our benefits team work extremely hard. We're employing more staff, and we have, like I said, all these floating supports, and the services are there. So I don't agree that you've had that response, and if you have had that response, then I'd like to know who it was from.
Thank you, Mr. Heath.
It was from one of she's asked me a question. It was from one of your officers,
Mr.
and
Heath.
I'll be pleased to meet you with Councillor Harvey,
Mr.
who
Heath,
can confirm that. Thank you.
You had your supplementary. Thank you very much indeed. No, thank you, thank you. No. No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Heath. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Colin Statham. Mr. Statham, you got 3 parts. Sorry?
Sorry, point of order. Parish Councillor Statham, representing Ruxtown Parish Council, not as an individual.
I'll accept that, and
The question has been tabled.
it has been tabled, and I'm going to accept the questions. And the first part of your question, I'll ask the Chief Executive to answer that. Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first part of the question relates to a point of order. Mr. Mayor, can I first say that normally points of order are raised under debate, paragraph 3.14 of the Constitution, and will therefore be raised by a borough councillor. That said, I will seek to answer the point. A point of order should only relate to an alleged breach of a full council procedure rule or of a statutory provision. There is no statutory requirement to provide for public participation at council meetings. Our arrangements for public participation at full council meetings are set out in Appendix 5 of the Constitution, that's page 141 of 277. Therein it is stated that questions should be received by 12 noon on Monday of the week of the meeting. In summary, therefore, points of order should be raised by borough councillors, and even if one was raised, I can find no breach of either a full council procedure rule or any statutory provision. Further, given that the second and third parts of the question are before you, it is quite evident that it's possible properly to lodge questions which can equally properly be answered tonight. I can find no grounds, Mr. Mayor, for striking the item out of the agenda or postponing the decision, and in addition I would note that there has been every opportunity for public representations at numerous planning and infrastructure overview committees and also at Cabinet. And further, if the plan is approved as a pre-submission plan tonight, it will then go out for a period of extensive public consultation when representations can be made on the plan. Mr. Mayor, one other point I would make, the public participation scheme in Appendix 5 of the Constitution isn't specific to items on the Council agenda. It's generic, and it relates to the public being able to ask questions relating to council and borough business. And I can see absolutely no reason why you should not proceed with the debate on the local plan this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Now, the remaining 2 parts of the other questions. Councillor Raphael.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I thank Councillor Statham for his question on behalf of Ruxtown Parish Council. In terms of his query about transport and issues surrounding the A339 and the Roman Road, I can confirm that the Borough Council is undertaking a transport assessment to assess the impacts of the local plan development on the highway network, which will include the A339, the B3400 and the Roman Road. The transport assessment reports on the performance of the borough's strategic highway network in 2012, which is known as the base year. Information has been sourced from recent traffic count data supplied by Hampshire County Council and transport assessments used to support land allocations and development proposals in the borough. The transport assessment forecasts the likely impacts of the local plan development on vehicle movements on the defined highway network in 2029, and a draft of the transport assessment was published on the 19th of July and is available to download from the Borough Council's website. The next phase of the transport assessment is to identify mitigation measures for those junctions likely to experience performance deterioration as a result of the local plan development, which may include improvements such as signalisation or additional lanes. Once these mitigation measures have been developed and agreed by the Highways Authority, which of course is Hampshire County Council, the transport assessment will be updated along with the infrastructure delivery plan. These measures will be required to support new development as sites are brought forward in the borough. In respect of the final question from Councillor Statham, the local plan is focused on meeting the needs of the borough in moving forward to 2029, including housing, employment, retail, leisure and infrastructure. The local plan is supported by a comprehensive evidence base, including a strategic housing land availability assessment, which details all of the sites that may be suitable for housing development in the future, based upon these sites that have been put forward by landowners in the borough. In this respect, the landowner of Manydown site has suggested to the local planning authority that the site be developed for residential development as part of the local plan. Members of the Borough Council's Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee have carefully considered all of the Category 1 SHLA sites, including Manydown, through a detailed site assessment process, and have come to the view that the site should be developed for approximately 3,080 homes during the period of the local plan. Accordingly, this site is one of the 11 that have been allocated in the local plan for primarily residential purposes to meet the borough's housing needs, and for that reason I do not support the suggestion made by Councillor Statham for the use of the land.
Thank you. Mr. Statham, only one supplementary question for clarification only.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for the answers. In order to clarify matters, we understand the Council does have its hands tied behind its back with regards to the Manydown part of the local plan from past history. But you have already shown that from the output of the Cabinet meeting, which includes the addition, after the closure of questions for this meeting, of the inclusion of the provision of a link road and the required A339 and B3400 part. That was an additional point came out of Cabinet that the public have not had the right to actually come to the meeting here and raise questions on because of the closure of the point of public participation. Okay. It also...
Questions, please.
Okay. The question related is, why is it acceptable to, when you have rules like that, to break them in order to shorten the time frame of a particular very critical policy?
Councillor Raffles.
The point of the timing of the inclusion of that part of the policy. It was mentioned time and again during the discussions on the Manydown policy and when the subject of Manydown was raised at the Planning and Infrastructure Overview and Scrutiny Committee, that the committee felt that a Western Relief Road was essential. The fact that it didn't end up in the original draft, I felt was an omission. And I felt that it reflected the will of that committee, and it subsequently, I hope, will be the will of this council that it is included. Can I point out to Councillor Statham, Mr. Mayor, that he has the opportunity to comment upon that in the consultation if he feels that that isn't appropriate. But I can say that it was the will of the committee as I understood it to be appropriate, and I wouldn't have included it had I not felt that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Statham. Mr. Alan Stone. We have your question, and I'll ask Councillor Golding to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that this question may be based on a misunderstanding. I can't recall anything that was said at the last council meeting to indicate that either we as a council or other people had identified more than 130 illegal HMO properties in the borough. We did indicate, I think, that there were a large number of unlicensed HMOs, but they are unlicensed because they're too small to require licensing. Even though they are unlicensed, we still check them regularly to ensure that they do comply with their legal requirements relating to fire safety and other matters. So it follows that I'm not aware of any families having been evicted or anything being raised in fines, because we don't have, we have been dealing through our normal processes with unlicensed HMOs and indeed licensed ones rather than illegal ones. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Stone, just question for clarification.
Okay, my second question would be, really, there are considerable illegal ones that I do know of in the town. There are plenty of smaller houses that are renting to more than two other families, which constitutes HMO as far as I'm aware. Is there any procedure for informing the council of these, and would they ever act on it?
Indeed, we welcome being informed, and if people would like to inform us, you contact the Environmental Health Team either by telephoning 01256 845 331, or by emailing team@basingstoke.gov.uk, and every point like that is followed up, and we will check whether they're an HMO and whether they need licensing and whether they're breaking any legal requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Martin Heath. We have your question. Now I'll ask Councillor Raphael.
Thank you. Could I just add a very quick correction to my question? I did say in my original question that the government target for reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 2020 is 20%. Clear, as I'm sure the portfolio holder actually knows, the government target is actually 34%. My apologies for that.
Okay, Mr. Heath. Councillor Raphael.
Mr. Mayor, may I begin by thanking Mr. Heath for his question. It's important these issues are kept at the top of all councillors' agendas. Can I say that I'm not actually the portfolio holder for some of what he's asking, but I might be the portfolio holder to whom he ultimately wants to direct his question. So I'm going to try and answer it. And if I fail, I know that Councillor Donnell will pick up, who has the other half of the portfolio. The local plan supports the government's agenda as set out in its objectives, seeking to support measures that will help to reduce carbon emissions and provide greener and more energy efficient development. This includes policies that direct development to the most sustainable locations, that promote opportunities for sustainable transport modes and the use of alternative vehicle types and fuels, and enable appropriate development for the generation of energy from renewable and low carbon resources. So the plan supports all of that. In line with the local plan evidence base, the plan does not include an additional sustainability standard above building regulations, except for addressing the key issue for the borough of water resources. The local plan sets out requirements for water consumption and water use, which are not mandatory elements of the Code for Sustainable Homes. Sustainability standards and related issues need to be considered in the context of the NPPF, which stresses the importance of the plan being viable and deliverable. It states that pursuing sustainable development requires careful attention to viability, and that development should not be subject to a scale of obligations and policy burdens that their ability to be developed viably is threatened. The government targets run to a different timetable to the local plan. In fact, they run to 2020 rather than 2029, and are subject to ongoing review outside of the plan process. Therefore, the inclusion of such targets is not considered suitable. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Raphael. Councillor Donnell, do you want to add anything?
I was going to wait till after the clarification if needed, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Heath, question for clarification only, please.
Clearly a presumption that I had one. Yeah, I do. No, thanks for that. And could I just quickly thank the Mayor as well for allowing my question to appear. And I know it was it's submitted late, but for various reasons. Apparently so. Anyway, perhaps I should move on.
Please, a question, supplementary question.
Can I ask my question? You've had your chance. Thanks. Look, for many years, I've worked in big businesses, ran successful businesses, and we always had a rule about policy and strategy, and that was that policy was smart, and that basically meant things were specific, they were measurable, they were achievable, they were realistic, and they were time-bound. Also, I noticed that the Institute for Government and the Better Government Initiative has also made comments on what good policy should be. And they say that all good policy should be evidenced and fact-based. It should have clear objectives, and it should have measurable outcomes. And I am coming to my question, Mr. Mayor. So let's just talk about outcomes. We're looking for 20% reductions, 34% reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, 20% of our energy coming from renewables. Basingstoke spends £550 million on energy in the UK.
Please. Yeah.
So if we've got this opportunity to do this, I wonder why we're not doing it. So perhaps I should just move to my question. Yeah, so given that good policy is all about being smart, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. And it's always about using up-to-date information and facts, whereas our policy is based on a report written in 2006. And policy is all about having clear objectives and measurable targets. And the current policy has none of these. Can the portfolio holder, or perhaps I should say portfolio holders, explain to us how we will know if and when the proposed policy is actually achieving his objectives? Indeed, are we actually aware of what those objectives are? Many thanks.
Councillor Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Heath. First of all, can I compliment you on your fine work that you have done for the council on our own buildings, installing PV panels, and it's great that the first one of those is already up and running. I think a lot of your points will be undertaken when we start to develop up our climate change strategy, but as the councillors in this chamber know, that same strategy is being written by the very same officers that the Chief Executive complimented earlier in this meeting, because they're also writing the local plan. Unfortunately, those officers cannot work any more hours than they're already doing, so we have had to delay some strategies in order to get the local plan in front of us today, and importantly get the local plan out for consultation with the public. Having said that, I do agree with Mr. Heath that all of our policies should have realistic targets and should be specific. It is clear that in consultation with the public, and I would hope that Mr. Heath would take that opportunity, that we will make improvements to that local plan. Every councillor here, I think, would agree that the aggregated wisdom of our public will indeed improve our plans. I would welcome his feedback during the consultation policy, but it is important to remember in our local plan we have to have the balance between, yes, encouraging community energies, but also making sure that they are situated in the right place, situated where they do not destroy our countryside, where they do not impinge on our countryside. It is a balance, it is a difficult balance to do, and people will take differing views on that balance depending from where they come from. I acknowledge that, I think we all have to acknowledge that, but I would like to continue to working with Mr. Heath and his company in order to promote these going forward.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Heath. No petitions, and I've got no reports to the council. Now I come to the item which is to receive and determine the following recommendation from the Cabinet held on 22nd of July 2013.
And the yellow page.
So that will be on page 4094.
It's not numbered, it's yellow.
It's a yellow page. It's not numbered, but it's a yellow page on the update. Yeah. Yeah. Can I call on the leader or his portfolio holder to speak?
Mr. Mayor, I beg to move the recommendations on the yellow page, and I ask Council to support the recommendations. Mr. Mayor, on Monday night, there was a programme on BBC4 about Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor, and how they met later in their lives to act in a play together. It starred two excellent actors, Dominic West, who was the Baltimore detective in The Wire, and Helena Bonham Carter, well known, who recently starred in The King's Speech. It was a fascinating portrayal of how two old adversaries could not help sparring off each other, and it drew the crowds to the theatre as the drama was made by the actors' behaviour towards each other and not the script. However, after some ups and downs, they put their differences behind them and concentrated on the script, and the result was a fantastic performance where people then came to see the play. It got me thinking about this local plan.
Please, would you, in the audience there, can you let the speaker speak? because everybody else wants to hear what he has got to say. And can I also just say that we have got 10 minutes, Councillor Raphael.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, we know the history of this process, but in the last 3 months, we have achieved so much by focusing at long last on our audience, our residents, and on the fact that a local plan must be delivered to protect them from planning by appeal. It has helped me, as I've moved from stage manager to producer, to admire the talents that we have on the P&I committee. Councillors rarely sing each other's praises, but I have to say you collectively have talent. Your careful analysis, and I include all councillors in this, your careful analysis of the evidence supporting the housing number, the affordable housing policy, the transport assessment work, the general policies and the site policies has been a pleasure to watch. You may think I speak too highly, but I do not, because your analysis revealed deficiencies in the evidence and the language that needed resolving, but would not have been resolved had you not persevered. The difference between, Mr. Mayor, the difference between stage manager and producer is noticeable. As stage manager, I wanted the cast to have their say within a given period of time, sometimes needing to keep the actors in line, sometimes needing to prod them, but keen not to over-influence the course of the performance. As producer, I'm able to recognise 3 things: the talent of the actors, that the audience has voted to hear them all, and that I must stamp my authority on the production. It is my job to make sure that the production brings out the best in everyone. I recognise that for this production to stand the test of time by the critics, it has to be forward-thinking, it has to recognise that new actors will come and try to understand the script, and the critics, despite what we might think as actors, are always right. Now the real question is, how do we classify this production? Councillor Gavin James might try to inject some comedy. He does it well because in his day job, he sees so much tragedy. It could be a tragedy because we are causing pain to various parts of our borough as they see greenfields replaced with new homes. And it will turn into a tragedy if we don't agree the plan tonight. Mr. Mayor, as you know, not all performances are comedies or tragedies. They are accounts of real life, just like the King's Speech. It could have been one or the other, but it was real life, and this is real life. We live in a wonderful borough. People want to stay living here once they've grown up. People from other parts of our country want to live here, and some will want to work here. All of that is good news. Basingstoke-on-Deane is a great place to live and work. We have decided on a housing number based on evidence that takes account of the fact that we cannot stop inward migration to our borough. So in order to cater for our own housing need, we have to build more houses than that need to take account of our borough's popularity. We also looked at how best to develop homes for those who live in our borough but cannot afford a new or existing home at market value. I have listened to the representations made at P&I and have set a target of 40% affordable homes. There is evidence that developers can achieve this, and we know that when the housing market becomes more buoyant, and today's news suggests that it is starting to become more buoyant, then profit margins will be greater, and this will be easier for us to achieve. We have had a transport assessment. The worst case scenario for the end of the plan has meant that substantial improvements are needed to our road network. I have listened to the representations made at P&I and have introduced words in the Manydown policy for a western bypass. And I shall be asking officers to become, the borough's planning officers, to become involved in master planning on all the major sites. That we can plan for infrastructure to be delivered alongside the new development. We have discussed the policies, And I have to say the transformation in the policies between what they were some time ago when they first came to us and what they are now is fantastic. The site policies are now robust and say what we as members want them to say. We have a policy on new housing in the countryside that takes account of the views of parish councils. We have a forward-thinking policy on Basing View. We have a policy on landscape character that has been designed by you, the councillors. We have a new policy of strategic gaps. It gives some comfort to communities worried about development pressures and affected by the sites selected in the plan. Strategic gaps in many cases will have green corridors on them, green corridors being a policy that I and the P&I committee have agreed to develop in due course. We have looked at green infrastructure and supported the draft green infrastructure strategy in its attempts to increase the minimum standards for green space for new properties. We have a great policy on commercial renewable energy generation. We all know that renewable energy, provided that it is self-funding, is a good thing. However, we also know that applications for renewable energy generation frequently occur in locations where you ask the question, but why here? We now have a straightforward test, impact versus benefit, where impact is specified and benefit is understood and easily articulated. There are other examples that I could give, but the message is simple. This is a local plan that has been shaped, moulded and tested by all of us. It is our plan. Embrace it, commit yourselves to it, and please, please approve it tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Raphael. Now, Councillor Laura James or her nominee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hart.
Well, here we are. 5 long, tortuous years in the making. This whole saga, continuing the acting theme, feels more like a Shakespearean tragedy in many ways. Act after convoluted act, with heroes and the villains are many in many places. A comedy of errors, you might say. As we've navigated our way through a flawed schlar process that had to be called in, meetings where the politics overrided the lawful and rational planning. It took a judicial review to bring the administration back to its senses, and yet some of them, even still today, appear to be in denial. And then a mad rush for the finishing line in a mammoth series of meetings, well-intentioned meetings, which had some but not all of the evidence, for example, an incomplete transport assessment. And even today, here in this chamber, we still don't have the full picture. It's taken the portfolio holder over the weekend, rewriting policy, presenting changes to Cabinet on Monday night, to bring us to this point, balancing not just an attempt to reach out to members, but also to balance the open division in his own group. That work at the 11th hour rewriting policy, while best of intentions, does leave us vulnerable to challenge at EIP, and that is something we need to be aware of. It's taken 4 cabinet members, 3 chairs of planning and infrastructure, 3 heads of planning, and 2 council leaders to get to this point. The only destructive constant has been a spectre, a bit like Macbeth. One former Tory borough councillor floating around behind the scenes. He and his followers have stopped and prevented the sensible planning of this town for over 15 years. And his spectre still looms in the background. It is they who are responsible for leading this council into a JR and for the loss of our green fields, which are now going to be built on. The old version of the plan, before the JR, included 3,400 units on green fields. Now, even with the inclusion of many down, we see all, if not all, of those same green fields proposed and 7,500 units required. So, Mr. Mayor, we come to what is in front of us. What do we do? It would be easy to succumb to the desperation of needing a local plan, the desire we all have to have something to prove that will help us fend off planning by appeal. But planning by appeal is here anyway. Half of all the greenfield allocations are already in as planning applications that will have to be determined outside of this process, regardless of what we do tonight. Not one of those sites will be judged against the strategic needs set out in this plan. Not one will contribute the infrastructure that we know is required. Not one will give us the housing we know we need, nor protect the things we hold dear on those sites, because each will be judged on their individual merits, not the strategic big picture. Set against that, what we do here tonight must be because this plan meets the needs and will deliver for the people of Basingstoke and Deane. I believe, as do my Labour colleagues, and I know other councillors in this chamber,
that truly affordable housing is the #1 priority for any local plan. It matters that we allow what we allow to be built and what the policy framework enables the developers to do. We've argued consistently for a 50% affordable housing target and a 10-year split of 70% socially rented housing and 30% intermediate. The Three Dragons work on viability and the community infrastructure levy is so weak, it makes such generalised assumptions on key figures that the data is flawed. Basingstoke and Deane is not simply two market areas, one urban and one rural. The approach is far too simplistic for the purposes of setting such an important policy. If we take the infrastructure delivery plan, costed at some £200 million, we see that the SIL may only collect £100 million, and that is if all of the sites are delivering on their strategy. The problem is 6 of the biggest greenfield allocations are coming forward now as planning apps. 2 of them are at appeal, so they will not contribute to delivering much needed infrastructure. 2 of them have already made it clear they will be arguing to get out of their key obligations. I remember all of the years I've sat in this chamber listening to the Tories tell us how infrastructure must come first before development, how it was absolutely crucial and critical that it was the right homes in the right places. It sounds pretty hollow set against the reality we're now seeing. And to make matters worse, we know that major employers on the Chinham Business Park who are actively looking to leave Basingstoke because of the choices being made in this plan. If we lose those jobs, if we lose those employers because of this plan, that would be a disgrace. When it comes to housing, we need a far more sophisticated policy. And we want to see a policy that promotes a cascade approach to ensuring socially rented housing that is affordable on all major sites. Wokingham, Oxford and Woking all have best practice policies. The Wokingham example is very interesting in the way that they set out 50% as a target and present a series of options as absolute minimums regardless of viability, in essence guaranteeing at least some affordable housing on all sites, but accepting that the starting point is 50%. The Woking example is also a good one, where a sliding requirement has been adopted which approves 50% on all strategic greenfield sites, and different requirements depending upon the scale of development and the location, as opposed to a flat catch-all percentage. Mr. Mayor, there is not one word about socially rented housing in policy CN1. So if we settle for this tonight, then we are simply signing away the future of these sites, where we will see housing that does not meet the needs of the people we represent. People need a single income of over £35,000 to begin to consider getting on the property ladder in Basingstoke, which excludes 45% of our local population. For an average price property, 60% of the population is excluded. Even to hold down private rented accommodation, you're looking at incomes of over £24,000. But we're also responsible for helping all those people who are earning no more than £11,000 on our register to secure a home that they can afford. Let me make this real for you. Kirsten Robinson lives in a rented house near Basingstoke with their partner and their 2 children. They live with the constant threat that they could be given 2 months' notice by their landlord and can't afford to buy a home in their local area. Kirsten said, and I quote, "Knowing that we could be asked to leave at any time is a constant worry, but we simply can't save enough each month to afford the deposit. I'm a teacher, and most people my age who own a house were helped out by their family. If it's not an option, then buying a family home is totally out of reach in our area. The quality of policy we see in other places puts ours to shame. On the green infrastructure strategy, members wanted the minimum standard removed, but it's still there. On biodiversity offsetting, it was agreed members want that removed. It's still there. On Kennel Farm, members wanted a 50-metre buffer to protect the ancient woodland, but we've not been listened to. And for just good measure, in the first 2 years of this plan, which have already gone, we've seen just 993 units delivered, opposed to a target of 1,496. So already we are running 500 units behind, which will pile the pressure on later towards the end of this plan. In regard to Manydown, Mr. Mayor, if there was one site, ever a site that stood out in our ownership, in the interests of those we represent, in the context of the SHMAR, the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, and when we will appoint developers who will meet our brief, we can, in that sense, set a target of 50% affordable housing, with the security of the planning purposes for which the land was purchased. Remember the reason we bought Manydown? How the then council leader sold the idea of selling off all the council houses of the borough by promising to invest the money in new affordable housing. That promise is something we should deliver on. We are morally obliged to fulfil. But more than that, one that will meet the needs of so many local people for good quality affordable housing. It would be such a statement to everyone else of our aspiration and ambition to meet the needs of people in a sustainable, affordable and appropriately planned way. This could really be a landmark development if we plan it well enough, and 50% affordable housing is a crucial part of that plan. If Winchester can build council houses, it beggars belief that we're still behind the curve on this, and we should be leading the issues tackling the housing crisis. So, Mr. Mayor, putting all the angst to one side, and there'll be plenty of that this evening, and the desperation to get a local plan, and there'll be plenty of that this evening, the bottom line is whether this plan will deliver for the people of Basingstoke. And with all of the best intentions, and with everything that's been said, I do not believe it will.
1 minute. Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Gavin James.
Good evening, Mayor. I'm not sure injecting comedy into a Conservative tragedy is a compliment, but I'll take it as one. We're here at last, and I thought I'd give a balanced speech, and first by paying tribute to the Conservatives and give them some credit. The first bit of credit is for consistency. The local plan is a big project. It's a few years late, and it's over budget, and I think that's consistent with all our others. The next thing I should mention is, to be fair to the administration, drawing up the local plan is not easy. There are many pitfalls and traps, and I want to congratulate them for finding all of them. I will start with the numbers. It would be easy for me to stand here highlighting the honesty and integrity of the Liberal Democrats against the opposite from the administration, and I'm going to do that. Since 2007, every scrap of evidence based on professional statistical analysis has advocated a number somewhere in the mid-700s. The Liberal Democrats have not pretended an alternative was possible to scam a few votes. Yet we've had the Tories talking about 250 homes a year, maybe 594 homes a year, which they said they'd already delivered. They've ignored the facts. Yet at the same time, whilst fighting growth, they've been saying they're encouraging growth. Mr. Mayor, I'm sure everyone in this chamber has read next week's Cabinet papers. Some of the Cabinet are now looking nervous. It says quite clearly in there, it lists them helpfully in those Cabinet papers. In 2006, we were given new growth status, and we celebrated that. In 2008, we were designated Diamond for Growth, and we celebrated that. The Council's vision represents growth. And the Basingstoke Area Strategic Partnership joint vision includes the words, enjoying an excellent quality of life and the environment which has been improved through well-planned growth. Mr. Mayor, it's not surprising to see the Conservatives argue with facts. And on the sites, they argue with each other. But on growth, they seem to individually argue with themselves in their own heads. I'm not sure how that works. To make them feel slightly better about the numbers, Labour's position has been a bad joke. And conveniently, I have the bad joke. Why can't the Labour group do the National Lottery? Because you're not allowed to abstain on the numbers. Which moves us conveniently onto sites. I want to take you on a journey, Mr. Mayor, back through history. You'll remember under the last local plan, someone suggested Manydown. And quite rightly, the Save Manydown group rose from nowhere to highlight the concerns about such development. The first party to join them was the Conservatives. They were quick to make promises and make friends. When it became clear the threat had moved to Basing and Chinham, we saw the rise of Solve. And once again, the Conservatives were the first to make more friends and to make more promises. If you ever wondered why you never saw a Conservative on a bus, it's because they only jump on bandwagons. To give you an example of the promises they made, I will read from a publication called In Touch. It's not dated. I call it the Scarecrow edition because it's got a great picture of a field with a very confused scarecrow standing in the middle of it, although apparently it may be Councillor Godson, in which case I apologise. It says here, and this was shortly after they decided not to promote Manydown, you can expect to be told by the local Liberals that this will mean that the Chinham-Basing border is now in danger, as this was the alternative site when Manydown was first mooted. It's a shame to squash a good rumour with the truth, But the fact is, the only group that would ever sanction a major development on the top of Piatt's Hill is the Labour Lib Dem coalition. Conservatives have said time and again, no major developments on greenfield sites. Not at Manydown, not at Piatt's Hill, not anywhere. I wonder how that pledge is going. Tonight, Mr. Mayor, they're dropping those promises and they're dropping those friends. They always knew it was going to happen. We always knew it was going to happen. We always wondered, were you going to let down the East or were you going to let down the West? We underestimated the Conservatives who have messed up both. Mr. Mayor, we don't have the plan I would have wanted. But those wasted years of not promoting, investigating or planning have cost this borough. The cost is Razors Farm, Cuffield Farm and of course Piatt's Hill. They're all in this plan because of the Conservatives and I never wanted that. The urban sites have had no discussion or scrutiny. Some, like the car parks in the town centre or Down Grange, aren't supportable. I don't believe many of them are viable. However, I do admit that overall the brownfield sites will produce or yield the number of properties the local plan suggests. So here, Mr. Mayor, is the painful bit. There is no amendment tonight, no magical alternative, and as of right now, if we're going to consult, it may as well be on this. Others will oppose. But to achieve what? Saving a site. Well, feel free to respond to the consultation, offer a viable alternative, and if it's better, then I'm sure it'll be adopted. Tweaking a policy? That's the principal reason for the public consultation. If there's something we've missed, something we need to change, that's why we have a public consultation. Mr. Mayor, a vote against is a vote against abdicating our responsibility to provide housing for the next generation. A vote for planning by appeal, and yes, those rejected sites, hard fought to exclude by many, could be back on the agenda. Perhaps just as important is that vision for growth, that quest for prosperity for all. How can you sell the borough to new business by saying, yes, we're investing in improved roads, well, possibly depending where we build homes and if we build them and how many, and we're not sure yet. Yes, we have a skilled workforce, which might even stay when we get round to deciding if we're building homes. And yes, our emergency services are good in this area. The standards are high, but we're not sure whether they will stay that way because obviously much of the new housing we need is for school teachers, for nurses, for police officers. They're the ones who need more affordable homes. Mr. Mayor, a vote against the local plan is a vote against prosperity, a vote against affordable homes, and it's a vote against jobs. I should say one other thing, Mr. Mayor. One other flaw in this plan, unfortunately, is the way in which local areas and parishes have been consulted and have been able to deliver properties. I just wanted to highlight an example that was worked out. If you look at the homes plans for Whitchurch, there will be 2.5 homes built for every person over the next 15 years for everybody on the waiting list. The numbers for Bramley are the same. The numbers for Overton are the same. If you live in Oakley, if you're on the waiting list in Oakley, if we build at the current rates considered in this local plan, you will be waiting 124.5 years before you'll get housed. It's ironic that the portfolio holder in charge of delivering affordable homes represents the worst ward in the country for delivering affordable homes. Mr. Mayor, this plan isn't particularly desirable, but it is rational and it seems to be lawful. And for the Conservatives, that's probably as good as it gets. So we should vote for it now.
Thank you. Councillor Bierman or your nominee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry, I can't make jokes about this because I think it's too serious. And I have to say, I am very angry about the plan and feel that despite all that's been said, many councillors and residents have, at the end of the day, been taken for granted. I do align myself with the observations about the hard work of the officers. Whether they were directed in the right direction is another thing, but the stupendous amount of work they've done has to be acknowledged. And I also wish to acknowledge the diligent work by the latest portfolio holder, who has undoubtedly worked hard to achieve something that I believe was unachievable and was the wrong thing to seek to achieve under the circumstances. But he did add some sort of, how should I put it, structure to the process, and seemed most of the time to take observations that were put seriously. So I think to a certain extent his introductory remarks were appropriate, that he did seek to engage. The trouble is, it just wasn't physically possible to do a proper engagement in the time that was available. And before I go into that a little further, I do wish to say that the one thing that I think is probably right about it, and that I don't think is to be argued about more, although it has been one of the hottest debates and topics, and that is the question of housing numbers. I thought where we were before was much too low and wouldn't be sustainable at appeal. This may be sustainable, although even this I could see creeping up, but it's a better starting point than where we were. But I am going to argue that we shouldn't be adopting the plan tonight. And that's on the basis that it's very important, yes, to look at where we are and the sort of things that Councillor James just mentioned. But the point is, as has already been said, and as I have to say on numerous occasions when I've visited P&I and other committees, and so it's a bit boring to those who've heard it before, we've already got the planning by appeal well underway, and we're not going to change very much now. It's the key ones that are likely to come forward under the appeal process are there already. So for heaven's sake, let's rush with where we are at the moment and make a dog's breakfast of the rest of the plan. Because, the plan might have to be adjusted to allow for whatever happens at some of these appeals. But to be rushing forward, and didn't the chairman of Rooksdown Parish Council put his finger on the point that really we followed one meeting after the another in a way that the chief executive might rightly say was constitutionally acceptable, but I don't believe was morally acceptable, because it didn't give members the opportunity to even think about what was in one report before it got to the next meeting, and in the meantime probably had half a dozen or a dozen amendments on the route. And so I have never had, I prided myself as a member in being prepared for meetings, trying to read most of the reports in detail, and having taken advantage of all the work that officers had put in to prepare one for the meeting. That was totally impossible under these circumstances. I have a job. A lot of people here have a job. And they can't just sit down waiting for the next amendment to come and then see how it fits into what we've already got and what the consequences might be, and then to consult with people in the who have voted for us to represent them in a meaningful and thoughtful fashion. That just wasn't possible, and in no way can I go forward on this report tonight and say, I have considered it, understand the consequences, and this is right for the borough. I would be betraying the people who voted for me, and in no way am I willing to do that, and we've been ill-served to rush it in the way we have. Yes, we might even have had another site come forward and then go to appeal, but if we'd have spent a bit more time, do you know, I attended P&I with the expectation that we were going to have site selection, not because I had had some sort of fancy dream about it, yeah, what a dream as well, it was because I had a sheet of paper that said we were going to have site selection on, I think it was the 15th of July. And then suddenly, no, we're not having site selection. We're going to discuss the merits of this particular site, but not sort of say this is a site that should be excluded or shouldn't be excluded. And one of the mantras, quite reasonably from the portfolio holder, has been, well, you know, if you're going to say this site isn't suitable, and there's certainly some around my own ward, but I'm trying to talk strategically still, that I believe were unsuitable. But we were always asked, well, where are you going to put it? And I always said Manydown. I'm sorry, very boring, but I did, because that's why I thought Manydown had been bought. And I did take the trouble to sit down, and it went to the previous portfolio holder, but I'd understood it had gone to the next one, to start the debate as to how I believed it could be achieved by putting much, much more on Manydown. But of course, that debate was never had, partly because we didn't have the time to have the debate. We've now got Razors Farm, Kiln Farm, Kennel Farm over in Overton. We've done the damage. I believe Many Down could have more could accommodate more. But I also have a problem there, because no disrespect to the people on the map, they were required to be discreet about what was going on. How can we possibly now be judging whether a bypass around Many Down is the right thing, or whether there should be a link road going through Many Down? I've not got the facts. I've not even got the last minute here. So to have a meaningful debate about how Many Down could be developed hasn't been offered to us, and certainly hasn't been offered to the public, and therefore the process is seriously flawed. I would even go as far as saying if there was somebody with the resources and the intent, they could probably put us up for another judicial review for not having gone through a proper process as is required of us to consult. And it's also not right to say, it's going out to public consultation, because we are constantly reminded, unless I've misunderstood it very drastically, when it goes out for public consultation, you can't start taking sites in and bunging new ones out, taking sites out and bunging new ones in and shifting things around. It's only for reviewing matters of fact and for looking whether it is sound in other ways, but not for rehashing and taking all the public views on board and having another think. It's just for, in effect, let's be honest, either having it thrown out or tinkering with what is there. So there's not a real opportunity for meaningful and deep public consultation. So I think anybody who's expecting that is going to be misled. I think throughout, as has again been alluded to earlier, we've been promised, mainly by the administration councillors, that we're going to get nothing will proceed without the infrastructure there. And then we very belatedly get this transport assessment. Now, I can't call it a joke because it's not funny. It's a tragedy. Here we are, the transport assessment isn't even complete. Some of the things that are being proposed are bizarre in the extreme. Does it take account of walking and cycling? In no way. And here we are, we're trying to say that we are doing things of an environmentally friendly nature. And by the way, I did mean to say when I referred to Many Down and why we should do it, it's a wonderful opportunity to develop a groundbreaking, a state-of-the-art development that really did superb environmental designs that could not only help our environmental footprint, but also be groundbreaking in terms of putting Basingstoke-on-Deane on the map. We do have this environment policy, EM8, which again I think is a disgrace. It sort of basically is saying you can do things of an environmentally friendly nature as long as it doesn't bother anybody. But really, we really have to be terribly careful about what we do, and we don't disturb anything or anybody. It should be the other way around. It should be a question of saying we want to do environmentally brave things unless there's a very, very, very good reason for not so doing. In the last minute, I'll just quickly touch on some parochial matters. Razors Farm, Air Products moved to the Hampshire Business Park because they wanted to be at a site where they wouldn't disturb residential properties. And now they're potentially going to have residential properties right on their doorstep if Razors Farm is allowed, if it goes forward in this plan. Totally unacceptable. We've got, as already been mentioned, businesses likely to leave the business park, both Hampshire and Chinham business parks, if the traffic gets much worse. Cupford Farm, which some of our colleagues over there said, it's only a reserve site, will never happen. Now it's very much in the plan. East of Chinham, and I will call it East of Chinham because that's what it is, we've got the incinerators, sewage works, and the A33 as a massive barrier between Chinham and the sewage works, and the development. All of them terrible things. We're going to have the worst of both worlds, and I'm very sorry, unless something very remarkable comes in this debate, I won't be supporting the plan.
Thank you. Yes.
Can I raise a point of order, please? I'd like to raise a point of order in relation to the order of business. On the minutes of the Cabinet on the 22nd of July 2013, on the third green page, it refers at the bottom of the page, it refers to the Chairman summarise that this is a work in progress that will go out to the consultation and more amendments may be made before it is considered by Council in December 2013 for final approval. Can I just refer you back to the paper before us, the council paper on page 17 of the timetable that contradicts that timetable. So I have written to the cabinet member today, and I would like for clarification so we all understand, because I think there are people here today that think that this is coming back to cabinet. And as Councillor Ruffles said sorry, Mark, sorry about that. As he said at Cabinet the other night, is that we will only receive things that are of major, not minor. And I think that we need to have clarification of this timetable and what is meant by major and minor.
Councillor Raphael.
Can I thank Councillor Ms James for notification of this question? It's just been a question of when the opportune moment to ask the question has been, and I obviously not starting a precedent for questions and answers between me and anybody else, because this is in the middle of a debate. She's absolutely right in her observations. It had been my understanding, or at least my prediction, that something is likely to arise that will cause us to need to consider it in depth. Let's hope it doesn't. But if it does, ultimately we would have to bring it back to full council. So the position is this at the moment. No full council is in the timetable because nothing has arisen to need to bring it back. If something significant arises, then we will have to bring it back and have a discussion on it. My current view is that if something significant arises, I think we should bring it back to a P&I committee first, so we can look at it in depth, come up with a recommendation, and then bring it to full council afterwards, so that we don't look in depth at something here, having not had a chance to consider it in depth beforehand and reflected upon it. So I'm not going to commit myself to saying this, but I'm going to say this is what my view is today. I'm going to look at scheduling in a P&I meeting towards the end of October as a sort of a destination that we might have to all meet and discuss whatever it is that comes back from the consultation. So it's in the calendar, should it be needed, and then we could have a full council in November so that it doesn't delay the next stage if necessary. But it's not in there at the moment. I have said to Cabinet, and I've said it informally at P&I, that any changes to the plan should be notified to all members. Even if we've taken a view as to what is significant or not, at least gives you an opportunity to make representations if you disagree with our judgment, and then we'll reflect upon that.
Thank you, Councillor Raphael.
Mr. Mayor, does that mean that it's your judgment as to what is significant and what is minor? And just to clarify, it doesn't come back then for final approval if it is a minor?
Well, it is, and that's, Mr. Mayor, it is because that's the recommendation. But I'm going to do it transparently. You're going to know, everyone's going to know what it is, Mr. Mayor, and it's going to be based upon officer advice, so that if there is something significant, it should come back and be discussed, and it should go to, in my view, at the current moment, to P&I first, where we can have a full discussion and work out the merits of where we are, and then come to full council afterwards. And that seems to be the view of the officers as well. I can only say that's where we are at the moment. There's no point in trying to do it by any other method other than transparently, because, well, it wouldn't succeed, would it?
Yeah, that's very clear. Now, councillors, it is a normal time, 5 minutes for the debates, and I call on Councillor Jayawardena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to speak as a ward member for Bramley and Sherfield because, as a member of the Many Down Executive Committee, I do not have an opportunity to do so at P&I nor Cabinet. I recognise that this plan is very important and would also join in thanking the Cabinet members, Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Golding, Councillor Sherlock and Councillor Raphael for bringing it to where it is and for hearing the various recommendations made by various committees. I recognise that there is great pressure on sites and on numbers, but in representing my ward and to find out the portfolio holders' thinking on such a matter in respect of my ward, I do move an amendment to look at the issues that affect Bramley and Sherfield. I have a duty to do this to council because I am a ward member and I must air the concerns of residents. I have suggested that the 200 homes for Bramley under the neighbourhood development plan is too much. The Cabinet and P&I have heard from the Parish Council on this matter. The Parish Council is making good progress to work up their own neighbourhood plan, and I'm asking that they be given time to devise that and determine a locally suitable number. For that reason, I've proposed in the amendment, and I'd welcome the portfolio holder's comment, the figure of 200 be moved to the overall NDP figure for the borough to be met from various settlements, including Bramley. It doesn't hurt anyone else. It is ensuring that Bramley gets to develop its own neighbourhood plan in its own time. In addition, I've asked that, recognising that certain sites and certain housing allocations are to meet a buffer requirement, that Redlands is identified as a reserve. Again, if it was required for development, so be it. But if it is not required, then it is protected as a reserve site. Bramley has grown more than the borough average, and I'm asking that Bramley be given respite to deal with the development that it's had over previous years. German Road was rejected by people on both sides of this chamber, and yet the government minister imposed it on us. The local feel for that decision is still there, and people want to recognise that their views have been listened to. They want an opportunity to have their say and craft a plan that meets their local needs on the local sites that they want to see developed to deal with the organic growth of our place, not a top-down imposition that could let a developer swoop in. So while I recognise there are many pressures, I do move an amendment, and I would welcome the portfolio holder's comment on what he sees to be a solution for Bramley and Sherfield. This isn't a political matter. I'm simply representing my local community. And with that, I move my amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, Councillor Tomlin, you are the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Obviously, it's slightly 11th hour, but you've heard the reasons. And as the other ward member, of course, really it's my duty to support this amendment for the good of Bramley and Sherfield. Yes, Bramley has seen above and beyond the average borough figures of development over many years. And it's already started its initial preparation of a neighbourhood plan. It's had very good uptake of people, which is a great thing to see. And I can see the advantages of trying to address the future needs of the community through controlled and beneficial development. To have the 200 house number applied as a sort of rigid figure, it does seem a little unjust given this recent growth. And I feel a number like that is such a red rag to a bull, and we'll see developers queuing to build that full number quickly and in a compromised single site development. And Bramley will lose control of its development. And by moving Bramley to outside the listed sites, where we said to put the numbers of the houses, yes, it will give a respite to the local villagers. They will get relief from the overloading of the existing inadequate structure that they are wanting to embrace and tackle with their neighbourhood development plans. And I do feel sure that the neighbourhood development plan will bring forward housing that will contribute to this plan. So I would ask you to support this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. What I'll do now, I'll ask a portfolio holder.
Councillor Beeman is next. Councillor Beeman had his hand up first.
Has he?
Yes, you've got to ask him.
Okay. Councillor Beeman.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor. I just wish to say that this is an amendment which might well have a lot of merit, but it's just landed on the desk here tonight as we have arrived. And this is an example of what is going to be happening all the time because people have last-minute great ideas for the plan that's been rushed forward so much. So whilst I think it probably has tons of merit, particularly if Councillor Tomlin is seconding it, I feel it should be left on the table for further consideration, and I can't see a way to morally support it, though I do thank the movers for at least presenting it in writing, which doesn't always happen. But bearing in mind that the local plan is one of the most important jobs we have to do, and to be progressing important aspects of the local plan on 11th hour amendments just isn't the right way to be doing and forming the local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Raphael.
Mr. Mayor, I'd urge members to vote against this motion. It's not the view of the P&I committee, who's considered at great length where the site should be. Can I say, in terms of how the plan presents itself should this motion go forward, in terms of tests of soundness, we have to be as explicit as possible about where development should be located, and to increase the number of houses to be delivered from the neighbourhood planning windfall, it's my view, would weaken the plan in this regard. There are currently only 4 parishes who have managed to put together neighbourhood development plans, and therefore there's no degree of certainty as currently where we stand at the moment as to where these houses will be, and it's something that needs to be progressed during the lifetime of the plan. Bramley itself has housing need. It needs to cater for its own housing need. I would also say this. Whilst I, of course, have sympathy with the views that have been expressed, and it's clear that Bramley has had to absorb significant growth over recent years, so have other areas of the borough. And it is collective pain that we're all sharing tonight. And it's not a question of some people saying, my pain is greater than yours. It can't be measured like that. I recognise that Bramley is seeking to put together a neighbourhood development plan, and it could be that within the life of the consultation period, in 2 months' time, they come back and say, well, we've made an allocation for a substantial proportion of that number, and what we can't find, based upon the evidence we have, room for the small remainder. Well, that would be a different position than we're in tonight, and it may be that that would need to be reflected upon then. But I cannot support the motion as it currently stands, and all I can say is we will obviously, all of us, respond to the consultation when it's ended, based upon the evidence then, if it changes. So I'd urge members to vote against it, and I think that's probably all I can say.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, on the amendment, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Councillor Jayawardena.
Mr. Mayor, having listened carefully to what Councillor Raphael said, and indeed what Councillor Bierman said, I am happy to withdraw the amendment tonight, given that it is at a late stage, and urge residents of Bramley and Sheffield to participate in the public consultation so that their views can be heard at a later date.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Jayawardena. But
Councillor Keating has a point of order. You must take
Councillor Keating, have you got a point of order?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This process had already been to judicial review, and we were found wanting. My understanding of what we were doing tonight was to finalise the local plan for the purposes of going to the public consultation with the final version.
It's not a point of order, Councillor Keating. It doesn't relate to the Constitution.
I hadn't finished.
Please get on to the point of Constitution.
Can I ask, please, for the advice of the Chief Executive, who has some experience in planning matters as well, if it is logical, rational and reasonable and lawful to go to public consultation with a local plan which is now defined as not finalised. Thank you.
Chief Executive.
Mr. Mayor, I will answer the question, but I'll just take the opportunity to say that none of the points of order raised tonight so far have been points of order, and you were quite right. Points of orders must relate to a breach of the constitutional rules in some way. Having said that, it's not a. There's been points of order relate to the constitution, but I will answer the question. The purpose of the meeting this evening is for full council to agree a pre-submission draft of the local plan. A pre-submission, at some point in a local plan process, a draft local plan must go out to public consultation. And subject to any amendments, and there is only one amendment that's been put that's now been withdrawn, at the end of the evening you will vote on the local plan that's before you. That is the local plan that was forwarded to you as amended by Cabinet. That is the pre-submission draft local plan, which will either be passed or it will be lost and we won't have a pre-submission draft local plan. If we have a pre-submission draft local plan, we have a complete pre-submission draft. We must have, by what I've just said. That will then go out to public consultation. To complete the point, which I think was clear between Councillor Ms James's question and Councillor Raffel's answer, sorry, not to complete, because it is complete, but just to confirm, I think what Councillor Raffel was saying in a nutshell in response to Councillor Ms James' question is that if as a consequence of that consultation process there is a need or even a desire to make significant changes to that plan, then Councillor Raffel committed to taking that back through a process of P&I committee and council. So at that point, significant changes to complete the plan would come through the democratic process before being submitted to the Secretary of State. If, however, following the public consultation, only minor changes were made to the plan and Councillor Raffel committed to be transparent with his word about how we identify those changes, we would have essentially the current pre-submission draft, which would therefore be complete and would then be submitted to the Secretary of State. So I'm satisfied that we are going through the proper process. At the end of the day, what will determine whether or not we have a plan to go to consultation will be the vote at the end of this evening's meeting.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
Thank you.
And I hope this is very clear now. Now we are debating the pre-submission local plan as amended by Cabinet.
Okay.
And I have got some of the names here. Councillor Porter?
Starting again, Mr. Mayor, with the list.
Yes.
Got you.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to see the withdrawal of the amendment. I hope that wasn't stage managed because my respect for Councillor Raffel has been increasing over recent days. But talking about the local plan, I think we all accept the community of Basingstoke and Dean desperately needs a local plan ready for public consultation. But the plan has to respond to the needs of Basingstoke and Dean and provide housing units for those in the population who have no realistic prospect of owning their own property. With nearly 7,000 people on the local housing waiting list, this local plan offers virtually nothing to those deserving residents who primarily want low-rent council houses. I know the prospect of using council houses as an element within our housing build is anathema to some, and even referring to council housing gives rise to prejudice, but council housing is what we should be building. At least 7 years has been wasted on the preparation of the plan, driving some to the verge of a nervous breakdown. I had hoped that we would now work together to deal with this major public asset, Manidown, which will influence the shape of the remaining plan. Despite being hauled before the High Court and found to have acted unlawfully, this administration continues to argue against a realistic capacity figure for this site. The same games continue to be played by members of the Cabinet. I have to agree with Councillor Harvey when I say I see the sense of the local Tories Macbeth behind the current manoeuvring of some members of this council's cabinet. Amazingly, on the eve of this discussion of the local plan, we have the county council agreeing to pay its share of £4 million towards the purchase price of the Manidown land so that it can share in its promotion and profit. But despite this, we have one of its cabinet members continuing to argue against its development. Presumably, the cabinet at county level doesn't understand collective responsibility any more than this one here, except when it comes to councillors still, that is, who wasn't allowed to stay outside of the tent as others now are. The real tragedy of all of this is that a project so well intended dating back to the mid-90s was allowed to become so corrupted. Having persuaded, and there are other words I could use, Basingstoke Council tenants into transferring to housing associations on the threat of massive rent increases, which was never going to happen, by the way, the purchase of the Manidown land from the sale of those council houses was intended to provide high-quality social housing in the future to meet the needs of the local population. For political gain and control of this council, those who promoted the purchase of Manidown then set about poisoning the minds of the people of Winklebury and Buckskin, supported by some of those who now sit in cabinet, against the development rather than seeking to explain the benefits that could flow from such a project. Having spent years isolating and denying Manidown, the Tories now find themselves seeking to row back from this position, recognising the all-important role this site has in the local plan. I want to see 50% of the total build as high-quality, affordable housing on this site, subsidised as appropriate, together with a recognition that Manidown is a vital extension to the community, not a separate and detached entity to be bypassed wherever possible. Winklebury can benefit hugely, as can other communities, from the enhanced facilities provided by the development of Manidown. All the wonderful facilities that can be provided on Manidown must be easily accessible to the residents of Winklebury and beyond. We don't want this to be a gated community. After all, the land was bought in part using Winklebury tenants' money. Even now, we seek to isolate Winklebury from Manidown without any proper recognition of the natural link between the two communities. Even the latest amendments suggest access limited to those who are able-bodied and able to walk or cycle. Despite views expressed at the members' advisory panel and a decision of this council's cabinet in 2012 seeking to change the figure from 3,020 to 4,000, ironically, or perhaps not, this was moved by Councillor Still at the time, we are told that the planning authority believes that any more than 300 units a year is undeliverable, hence the restriction to 3,080 units. Does this happen with any other site on the list? Of course not, and nor should it. I am finishing, Mr. Mayor. Unless and until we get Manidown properly included in our draft local plan, showing its full potential, I cannot support the document before us.
Thank you. Councillor Laura James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For over 5 years, I have sat on the committee after committee discussing the various versions of the local plan. And then 2 weeks ago, this council spends 2 hours discussing the policy on affordable housing. The committee didn't even get the report. We didn't even get the report until the evening of the meeting. And I understand that the cabinet only had the presentation on the same afternoon. This demonstrates this council's lack of commitment to affordable housing. It's been a struggle to keep up with the many versions of the policy, but we end up with a policy on Monday night that airbrushes out socially rented housing. Why are we allowing 7,500 homes to be built when most of them will not house people in need in Basingstoke and Dean? So who are we building them for? Are we building this level of housing to pay for the mitigation of our roads and infrastructure, or is it for the implications of the half-finished transport assessment? Basingstoke has to be more than just a centre for volume house building. What we allow to be built through the policies of this plan surely has to meet the needs of Basingstoke and Dean. There are so many examples of where we have debated and agreed something in committee which has been lost in this plan. For example, we said in planning and infrastructure and in housing and environment that we wanted the biodiversity offsetting policy removed and the from the green infrastructure plan that informs this local plan. Well, it's still in there. Another example is the green open space standard. Everyone agreed they wanted the minimum standard removed. If you go out for any negotiations stating your fallback position, you are compromised from the start. And this is why a 50% target on affordable housing should be our starting point. We should be committed to when possible finding ways to help our RSL partners and developers meet that target. We need to do better with this local plan. You are asking us to support a local plan that last week had the word socially rented housing in it, and this week they've been removed. I'd just like to thank the Deputy Leader of the Council who sent me an email this morning asking me to support his amendment. I understand he also spent lots of other people within my Labour group the email, gave us the reasons why he wanted us to support his amendment. I was quite amazed really that the Leader of a Council actually sends that out, particularly in what was said by the Cabinet Member, Councillor Raphael, at the meeting about the need for us to not be thinking solely about our own sites. And I'm glad that he's reassured us tonight that he's not politically playing political games, because that would be awful if he was doing that. And, you know, that's what this was about, that he actually used this process to play political games. And I was this morning when I woke up and had my cereal and opened my emails and saw it, I thought, I just couldn't believe it. I was absolutely shocked that that we were receiving an email. And I was also asking some of us in the Labour group to keep it confidential, but we didn't. We did actually tell the press. And going on to what was said later on earlier on by Councillor Gavin James, he said that the plan is lawful and it's rational, and that's the best that we're going to get. Well, in the Labour group, we actually want more, and I want more than that. It's got to be more than just rational and lawful if we're going to have a local plan that's going to be around for lots of years.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. I was named. Point of clarification. We have been discussing this council plan for many, many years and many, many meetings. In fact, Councillor Mrs. James has already indicated she sat in most of those meetings. The fact that it's rational, lawful, and we should get along with it is because if after 5 years we can't improve it, then it's time to give the public a chance. That's the point I was making.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The portfolio holder referred to a recent television programme, but the programme, or rather film, that came to my mind when I thought about the local plan was actually a film called The Producers. And some of them may remember that the premise of that particular film is that two rather dubious characters set out to produce a play that is so perverse that it is bound to lose money. Now, the joke, of course, is that the play is ultimately a roaring success, but the point still stands that if the Conservatives had the Conservatives couldn't have tried harder to produce a worse plan. And if you think about the process that we've gone through, the shambles of the SHLA, the judicial review, the lateness and incompleteness of the transport assessment, the late changes to policies, the planning by appeal that has already occurred as a result of the incompetence of the administration for much of this process, the failures on issues like green space, biodiversity, the weaknesses of the plan, and its pure frailty. It was amazing, but you know, I've had a certain justification that from the minutes of the cabinet meeting, there was reference to the fact that, you know, there might be a problem with delivery of the golf club site. And that's something that I drew attention to quite a number of months ago, and it really is quite shambolic that we can have these sort of potential areas of sort of risk and uncertainty and frailty in a plan that has taken so long to develop. There have been those strategies delayed, the toing and froing on housing numbers, the failure in terms of references to walking and cycling and public transport in terms of the state of play as far as mitigation of transport issues is concerned. The missed opportunity of Manidown, not so much missed, but actually lost long ago through political meddling by the administration and key figures within it. The Conservatives have indeed, done their worst. But it's not good enough, to be frank, to say that we've already got planning by appeal and therefore, we can live with yet more planning by appeal. That would actually be an abdication in my eyes. Not to actually try and progress things down the line. And I echo the thoughts of Councillor Gavin James in terms of it really is high time that the public had their say. They could hardly do a worse job than the administration has to date. There are very, very many weaknesses, frailties, deficiencies in the plan. The issue of green space that I've drawn repeated attention to. But it is important that we do now give residents the opportunity to have their say. There are going to be many, much more water to go under the bridge, I'm sure. But it would be an abdication, a complete failure, and a betrayal of our residents if we allowed yet more planning to appeal, by appeal to occur when there is at least a chance that we may reduce the incidence of that in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This particular local plan is still in need of much improvement. We do need a robust plan, and if the plan is rejected by the inspectors, then we will have more planning by appeal. Currently, we have 6 major sites identified in the local plan that have already had planning permission put in for it, and therefore, under the old rules, will be determined by the Secretary of State. One key element of the policies within the plan is the issue of social housing. It's taken out the issue of socially rented housing and is now talking about affordable housing only. Well, last week, as recent as last week, whichever version was available last week, we had policies which said for each site 40% social housing. At Monday night, we were informed, very, very good of him, by the cabinet member that he had changed the rules. He'd taken away the individual site numbers and put a general statement in 40%. However, if you look in detail at the policies about affordable housing in the plan, you'll find that there is another policy for rural housing development. And that policy says rural housing development will include more than 50% affordable housing. So now we have rural housing development, more than 50%, it's in the plan. Social housing and affordable housing and the rest of the plan, i.e. the urban area, he's now decided is 40%. Now, he told us this on Monday night. He told us lots of things on Monday night for the first time, by the way. And he told the Cabinet for the first time on Monday night that he had spent all day Sunday rewriting some of the rules. And the Cabinet, with their great depth of skill and ability, rubber stamped all those changes without so much as one word of discussion. Not one word of discussion. Now, when you look at affordable housing, we know that the one bit of land that we own, the Borough Council own, is Manydown. We know it was purchased with Borough Council money against the promise to buy land for social housing. I'm actually a member of the advisory panel on Manydown. Now, there is a convention that I mustn't tell you half the story, by the way, because it's all secret. It's all secret. But it's only secret if I have to apply it. But the Cabinet member, of course, can tell us anything he wants. So he told us on Monday night, for the first time, and he told the Cabinet for the first time, which they approved, by the way, that Manydown will be isolated from Winklebury. It'll be isolated. You will not be allowed, he will not be allowed, he says, to have a car driven through from Winklebury to Manydown. You can walk, or you can get in your bike, but no transport, no vehicle transport. So the schools, you can't take a child to school, either way. The clinics, the hospital, you have to go up and over and down.
Just a second.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, you're very kind. So I can tell you that if the Cabinet member has his way, Manydown will be the equivalent of a gated community without any social housing if he can stop it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cousin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Mayor, it's finally here, the long-awaited arrival of the local plan. Was it worth the wait? Was it worth the hype? No, it wasn't. The local plan, as of many other people said in this chamber, is sadly lacking. And what I find most intriguing about the local plan, Mr. Mayor, is the rushed end, the very forceful rushed end with the producer providing the script rewrites on Sunday. And really, that isn't enough time for councillors to really scrutinise the elements that are coming through. We need the time to fully commit to what's in front of us. A rewrite on Sunday and then going to Cabinet for Monday doesn't give enough time to look those papers over and see if we think they're right or not. Another thing that I find rather interesting, of course, is the sheer lack of unity on the Conservative benches opposite me. Not just on the benches themselves, but in the Cabinet. The Cabinet does not have a unity on this. And Mr. Mayor, I'm going to provide some examples of the lack of unity in the Cabinet. So let me take you back to 2011, October 2011, when Cabinet met. And Cabinet had in front of them some bits and pieces for the local plan, including the Dunworth sites. One such site was the Basingstoke Golf Club. Now, the Cabinet member for planning at the time, who is now the Cabinet member for housing, was happy to approve these sites, so much so that when he was asked by a golfing magazine, and indeed I've got the online version here, he said, "We are looking to develop new housing in the area, and finding sites for this is not always easy. We are very pleased that the members of the golf club have voted to sell the land." However, on Monday night just gone, Monday the 22nd, this particular councillor said that he could not support the local plan and that the golf club was not a suitable site. Why the sudden change of mind? I also want to mention the Deputy Leader, who, as Councillor Beerman mentioned earlier, there was a document laid out for us today as we came in. Some of us got this document a lot earlier. I received this document this morning, and indeed the Deputy Leader did ask me if I would keep it to myself for now. I'm sorry, Deputy Leader, that's simply not going to happen. And indeed, if any members that didn't get it would like a copy of the email, please see me. I will be happy to provide such documents. Also, 2 full councils ago, a member of the Conservative benches made a comment which the Deputy Leader smiled at. The comment that a member made was, if anybody says the phrase, "this isn't political," then it usually probably is. This particular member that said this quote will be happy to hear that the Deputy Leader made this phrase twice. And indeed, he said it again a 3rd time tonight. So am I to assume that the amendment that was Labour is now withdrawn is triply political than it intentionally was meant to be? The other thing I want to ask is, why the sudden interest in Bramley from the Deputy Leader? Back in 2011, when the member was elected for Bramley, he stood as a candidate for the Welsh Assembly. Would the residents of Bramley like to know that reason why? Why was he standing on 2 pages on one day? That's something for him to answer later down the line, I believe. But, as I said, these 2 members of Cabinet, they don't agree with the local plan. And the Cabinet is meant to show collective responsibility. Now, if these 2 members of the Cabinet don't wish to display that role of collective responsibility, will they now be considering their position? That's a question I will also leave them to ponder and answer at a later stage in time. With the wider aspect, we know that the Conservatives, thank you Mr Mayor, we know that the Conservatives are fighting with each other on the plan, and I have to say they are not divided, they are disintegrating. So how can we as councillors, getting back to the main point, how can we as councillors and indeed the wider public support a plan that even the members opposite cannot commit and convince themselves? Thank you Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cubitt.
I'd just like to congratulate Councillor Raphael on his really spectacular tenure as portfolio holder since for the last 3 months. We've had a very painful 5 years, and he has had a very, very difficult position. And I think he has listened as much as he could, has steered the ship in the direction as well he could, and with the impossible position that we all find ourselves in, I think really he has produced the best that we could possibly hope for. I think the Liberal Democrat position tonight really is quite farcical, since they have been so strong in advocating high numbers from the outset, but never been prepared to say where they want to put any of the houses. And the Labour Party has some very good points which I completely support in terms of bottom-up housing allocations and the fact that the greatest need in our borough is for council houses and for affordable homes. But also we also know that the Coalition has a very strong policy that councils should be building council houses on council-owned land, and I have repeated that on numerous occasions. Nonetheless, I do believe that the portfolio holder did listen very strongly and did change the affordable home number to 40% in response to very specifically the Labour group, but more importantly the whole of the Planning and Infrastructure Committee. When Councillor Keating criticises Councillor Raphael for working extremely hard this Sunday and for making amendments at the 11th hour, these are not amendments that were made at the 11th hour. These are as a result, I believe, of extensive collegiate discussions that have taken place in planning and infrastructure. Not all of what we wanted has been taken on board, but hey, that's politics, and the pain has to be collective. We have to all acknowledge that. So with that in mind, I am very definitely going to support this local plan, notwithstanding the qualifications that I've made at previous meetings on certain areas, which I'm not going to talk about tonight. But just to remind all of the councillors, in a way that you all know anyways, that our principal raison d'etre is for the betterment of the borough. And I believe that this local plan is the best that we can hope for, irrespective of the history that has got us to where we've got to. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keith Watts.
For avoidance of doubt, Mr Mayor, can I explain I am here? There seem to be rumours to the contrary,
Thank you.
I was disappointed the amendment was withdrawn, and I wasted some time writing an extremely excellent response to it. I'd already thrown away what I was going to say otherwise, but now, of course, Councillor Cubitt has given me the cue. It's 6 years. It's 6 years since we saw what was said to be the first draft of the SLA, the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment. In fact, that wasn't the first draft, because it had already been sold to some people called stakeholders, who apparently don't include councillors or the public. And during that time, I have to say, probably the most diligent and energetic councillor on planning and infrastructure on all of these issues leading up to now have been Councillor Cubitt. Now people have been banding around the word politics and political today. It's stupid. Of course it's politics. It's all politics. That's what we're here for. Politics is the way in which we agree decisions that are going to be binding upon us all. And anyone who thinks he's not being political really needs to go back to first base, I think. And reminds you, Mr. Mayor, the words of Otto von Bismarck: politics is the art of the possible. And I am supporting this local plan because I don't think it's possible to achieve a better local plan. I congratulate the members from Bramley in putting up their last-ditch fight, but excluding, of course, Councillor Tomlin, who hasn't been here long, perhaps they should have started a bit earlier. Because I know Councillor Cubitt's been engaged, I've been engaged throughout the 6 years in pursuing the interests of the borough as a whole and our own ward. And the reason that I'm happy, and have been, to support the proposals that are in there for Whitchurch, is that I've attended every opportunity to interact with planning officers or other members during this time. And I've also, and the whole of this time, Councillor Dunlop and I have been explaining to our neighbours and our colleagues the need for housing. Now, it's a simple need. We have some people here, they haven't got anywhere to live. What's the answer? Housing. Now, nobody likes building on greenfield sites. There are parts of the borough there aren't any others. But some far-sighted people some 20 years ago looked at Basingstoke and said, where are we going to get housing for a long time? And they bought some green fields, and many down. And certainly the whole time I've been here, and before that, the Liberal Democrat group has supported the properly planned and resourced development of Manydown. And that work had been done, it had been underway. Of course, some of it was done before the previous local plan, and it was stopped. And so the reason that it isn't possible to get a better local plan now is because the Conservative administration wasted all those years when the planning should have been done. I'm sure the Labour group disagree with this because they disagree with everything tonight. I was disappointed, actually. I mean, I'm here, I'm missing Teignmouth Carnival. And I thought it wouldn't be very long because the Labour group were going to produce a complete and perfectly formed local plan that we could all greet with acclaim and then get home early. But still, we don't know what numbers they believe in. As Councillor Cubitt said, people know what numbers the Liberal Democrats believe in.
1 minute.
And they know where we think they should be. Well, it is a tragedy of Basingstoke indeed, and it's not a tragedy of this council, it's a tragedy for all of us who live here, is that we're not going to exploit Manydown to its full in this time. Now, members of P&I will remember I bothered the head of planning a great deal some meetings ago by pressing him to accept there are ways in which more houses could be built in Manydown. Pretend it's not all one place and so on. And there was really no point in me doing that again, because, I mean, there is, I believe, a class of insanity that's described as continually doing the same things, expecting different results. There was that strange excursion when we had to have half a call-in, which has delayed us even further, which is why the extremely able chairmanship of Councillor Raffel has been necessary to do this. Vote for the plan.
Thank you. Councillor Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's certainly been much debate, but perhaps not much light over the last few years around the local plan. So I think if there's one thing that's clear to all of us, is we need to move forward to consultation. We must move forward to let the people start to improve our plans. It would be incredibly arrogant of us to say that we have to get it right and then do a tick-box exercise. We must let the people decide and the people improve our plans. And that's what our vote tonight is about. Is this plan perfect? Of course not. Is this plan fit for purpose? It can be. It can be, with the participation of all councillors in this chamber and with the public improving it together. Is it better than the previous plan? Yes. I honestly believe it is. We have to remember that that previous plan was thrown out at examination in public. So perhaps this time we won't be making the same mistakes. So how would I summarise this plan? Well, firstly, we've reduced the housing numbers. Housing numbers have fallen from 945 to what's in the plan at the moment. It's a very simple question to ask the Labour opposition. They haven't answered it for a whole thing. How many houses would you build? Please tell us. You've never told us before. Secondly, in this plan, we start to respect local communities. Now, as many of you in this chamber know, I would dearly love the fields of Manydown to stay green. Fortunately, the way they were bought, and not by a Conservative administration, means we have no choice but to promote them. The judicial review confirmed that. The way they were bought gives this council no choice. The previous plans for Manydown have been thrown out by planning inspectors. Previous plans had no respect for adjoining communities. I'd like to compliment the portfolio holder in his improvement to the site plans because they seek to protect the local communities around the development area. The plan makes very clear that we want to minimise the impact on local communities, preserve them, and seeks to produce a quality development. But I know my residents in Winklebury and residents adjoining wards will want to improve this plan, will want to comment on this plan. And I look forward to working with them, working with all their pressure groups to improve it. In the same way, I look forward to continue working on housing numbers and seeing if we can continue to refine our options on that. We do have to look at the alternative we have tonight. Labour have said that it's very bad we have planning by appeal now because we've got no plan. They said we desperately need a plan. But because it's very bad we have planning by appeal because we've got no plan, their answer is, let's not have a plan. So we preserve that really bad situation is. It's ludicrous. I believe the best way to protect all local communities in this borough, including my own, is to go forward with this plan, go forward to consultation, keep trying to improve it. Let the people improve it. We want to listen to them. We want to give them a chance. It's time to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Tomlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll see if I have any greater success with this attempt. I've sadly got grave concerns that Basingstoke's adopted vision will not be achieved with a local plan that's lacking master planning for all the proposed sites looked at as a complete package. Particularly, I fear that sites to the north and the east of Basingstoke, totalling some 2,000 houses, will lack an overall master plan and too much will be left to the individual developer. Now, I'm a project manager by profession, and if I was presented with this current draft, then I would have no hesitation but to hand it back to its author. My major comment would be, despite the good works, and I do applaud all the work that's been done, but the infrastructure delivery and the traffic analysis, for example, are not yet complete enough for the detailed view that is needed to agree this plan. The studies have already shown massive hurdles that we face given the plan as it currently stands. Too often we see the words mitigation in the report. Too often it will be left to the developers to provide the answers. The suggested mitigations, when we talk particularly on the traffic schemes, are very costly, where we have the estimates, will take up valuable land, which I don't think we have, will involve ongoing disruption for many years to come, given the volume of work required and the current sensitivity of our road network. I'm not convinced that they will work. The infrastructure development plan in Schedule 4 of our report identifies that to date the total sum for the necessary rather than the desired infrastructure is some £213 million. Now this figure is currently, to the spreadsheet, missing at least 8 major road junction mitigation schemes and currently has over 60 entries where funding sources have not yet been identified. The presentation that P&I members and visitors had on the local plan viability on the 3rd of July suggested how much SIL contributions could be sought whilst still keeping a plan development viable. And based on the presenter's figure for the levy, I don't believe we will hardly scratch the surface of the money we need. We can't afford the plan as it stands. So without sight of where the funding will come from, we must surely be risking failure to build the necessary infrastructure. And therefore we risk the reduction of developable sites as we cannot afford to pay for them. In any case, I fail to see how this council can possibly approve the plan at this stage without the clear facts of what we need, how much it will cost, and how we can pay for it. And I too thought of an analogy. Maybe you'll get where I'm coming from. It was a film in the end. Consider that we're on a trip to the moon, and all of us want to get there. We really do. But we've left the issue of the fuel to third parties to sort out while we're on our way. And that's where Apollo 13 springs to mind. Now, I can't believe this plan is the best we can do. Perhaps, as I'm obviously new, I've a lot more to learn on what this council will accept. I don't believe it is ready for our public yet, and so I'm very sad, but I can't support the plan right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs. Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'll be very brief. I brought a long speech and a short one with me, and I've selected the short one. It's actually with a great deal of serious and genuine regret that I cannot support this proposal. I have no criticism of the portfolio holder, who's done an excellent job within the time constraints that have been given, and I appreciate the respect with which he's listened to my views. My reasons for not supporting this plan are nothing to do with planning policies and constraints, NIMBYism protecting my patch. I recognise that no plan will ever get through if we cannot lay aside some of our preferences and see areas developed that we would not wish. I fully understand that the judicial ruling on Many Down required some land promotion. However, my sole reason for being unable to support this plan is that I cannot reconcile election promises made over several years with the inclusion in the plan of a major development of over 3,000 houses on Many Down land, pledged for protection from an MDA. It is solely for this reason, on the grounds of personal integrity, which supersedes all other considerations, that I regret I cannot give my support.
Thank you. Councillor Dean. Rebecca.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too will keep this quite short. I will be supporting the draft local plan and recommendation from Cabinet tonight in its entirety. With a document as long as this, with some 300 pages, it's inevitable that each time you read it, there may be some part you don't think is perfect, perhaps a tweak to some of the wording here and there. But I believe that in part, that is what the consultation is for. We have months to go through and pick out the odd typo, to change a word here and there. With regards to specific sites, 2 of the sites are very close to my ward of Hatchwarren and Beggarwood. There is a pain being felt amongst a number of wards, something felt by residents and councillors alike in respect of the site selected. This is a pain that I feel and I share, and one that is widely felt among many. But we have to accept that, as has been said before, we are where we are, so we must make the best out of what we have available. Our duty is to our residents, but that duty spreads beyond ward boundaries and to all of our residents within the borough of Basingstoke and Deane. As I have said, we are where we are. Homes need to be built and homes are going to be built. We owe it to all of our residents on a wider scale to have a robust local plan in place. It would be more detrimental and the consequences would be far worse for residents in my ward and in the whole of the borough if this plan is not supported. I do not want us to have planning by appeal. I want to have a say where we put our houses, and I want my residents to have a say. Finally, I would like to thank all of those involved for the time, effort and hard work they have put into producing this document, one they have produced for the benefit of all of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor John Leake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The update for tonight's meeting includes the minutes of the Cabinet meeting held on Monday. I spoke, and some of my comments are recorded in those minutes, but sadly not the point I was trying to make. I said, as is recorded, that over the past decade my ward had seen some of the highest levels of development, although most of the sites now form part of Popley or Rooksdown. I also said that if approved, the proposed sites at North of Marnell Park and Manydown would see a further 3,000 homes built in my current ward. I went on to say that historically I have opposed development on those two sites, but now recognise that we have few other options if we are to build 748 homes in each of the next 16 years. I said that despite my previous misgivings, I intended to support the plan, and that I will do. The point missing from the Cabinet minutes was my plea for Clause P of the Manydown policy to be amended so that the new development to the west of Basingstoke can be integrated fully with the existing town and not seen as an isolated development. A view I appear to share with my old friends opposite. In my mind, that would require amendments to Clause P to assist in the permeability of the northern part of the Manydown site with the neighbouring Winklebury and Rooksdown. Manydown is likely to see the construction of a wide range of local facilities, including shops and schools, which will benefit not only the residents of the new area, but also Winklebury, Rooksdown, and my own ward of Sherburn St John, not to mention Oakley. Tonight is not the time to raise these issues again, but I feel sure there will be an appropriate time to do so, and I shall take that opportunity. Mr. Mayor, we can all find reasons for excluding sites from the plan. However, the developers are ready to deliver the bricks, and we have no means of controlling them. Please, may we therefore stop special pleading and support the local plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hood.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The local plan is not only just about houses, it also covers the future of our employment land too, and I think that's essential. The safeguards we need to protect our employment land are crucial. We need the confidence that our major employers feel this plan backs their aspirations for our town and their future. We all know how many jobs are in the current economic climate. So, Mr. Mayor, I was saddened to hear that some of our major employers in Chinham Business Park are already threatening to leave the area and actively seeking alternative sites outside of Basingstoke. Because of decisions contained in this local plan put before us tonight, it doesn't give me confidence that the interests of jobs and employers are well balanced with those of housing. It leaves me asking questions about the rush to adopt this plan tonight. Plan by appeal is already happening. Even if this plan is approved tonight and an inspector spends time looking at it, planning by appeal is happening and will continue to be a major problem. So I suggest, Mr. Mayor, that we need to appreciate the consequences of our actions as regarding employment, and that includes the loss of major employers. Then I have a problem with this proposal. The infrastructure issue that these employers are worried about, the threat to their operation as employers, is something we must take seriously. Again, Mr. Mayor, this shows me that this plan at the moment is not quite ready to support the visions of the borough. Above all, businesses need stability. It needs to be able to plan ahead with some certainty about the future. Sadly, the administration's handling of the local plan has given businesses the complete opposite: dithering, delay and doubt. That's what this local plan is about.
I think all of us should take this seriously. Employment is the lifeblood of this borough, and we should treat that with respect. We've lost too many companies, and we should always ask ourselves, is it something we could have done better, and something we should do in the future? I'm proud of this borough, and one of the first things I learned when I came to Basingstoke is that we are open for business, and during the 1960s we were open for business. A lot of major companies came and relocated in Basingstoke and are still there. So it's important we maintain that association, protect them, so that it'll stay in for another 50 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gurdon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I first add my congratulations to Councillor Ruffle for all his endeavours in trying to pull this draft local plan together. But as far as I'm concerned, regrettably, it is still no credible blueprint for the future, and many big issues remain. But like my colleagues on the Liberal Democrat benches, I'm anxious to see that this draft local plan goes out to public consultation and does not get aborted or amended at this late stage. It's very important that we recognise the importance of public opinion and views on the many aspects contained therein. And I could have commented on a lot of things, but I'll refrain and concentrate simply on 2 or 3. I think George Hood is absolutely right in highlighting, together with earlier speakers, the danger to our business community, and every member in this room must be or should be mindful that the entire prosperity of this borough, which is one of the most prosperous in the south of England, rests on having a thriving and diverse business community. And in recent years, certain key players have moved away, and if reports of possible disaffection among the business community linked to aspects of the behaviour and the decision making of the Borough Council in the tardiness in bringing forward this local plan, then I think we have all a big responsibility for failing our wider community. There have been suggestions that the redevelopment of and refreshment of Basingview would bring 20,000 jobs. But where will the people be who work there? At the very best, I say, without more housing, there would be a great thrust of additional vehicles on the roads, our already overloaded highways. But at worst, as George has said, more and more key business players, partners in our venture of Basingstoke PLC will question the capacity and, if you like, imagination of this borough to look after their interests and that of the people who work there. Then much of this evening's debate has been about affordable housing, and to be honest, as a former mayor, I'm sure I'm not alone in having been called upon to open new properties that purported to be affordable, and to be honest, we've got the worst standards for space per dwelling in the whole of Western Europe. The demise of Parker Bowles, for example, many years ago, has meant that our so-called affordable houses, whatever affordable means, Parker Morris, thank you. What did I say? Oh, never mind.
1 minute.
Just testing. But if you see some of these small properties in which it's not possible for a family to sit down and eat a meal together, you would not be surprised to know of the pressures
that are put upon our society out on the streets of this town, or any other town, I might say, up and down the country. You know, we pretend that it's the numbers that matter, and numbers of housing does matter, but it's the quality of the housing as well. Now, on the Manidown issue, I might say, in the days of the joint administration, we were proposing, I think, something like 3,500 houses. Guess what? It was the inadequacy of 3,500 houses that caused the inspector to turn down that local plan.
Time.
Well, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Tilbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd also like to thank Councillor Raffel for trying to get the local plan back on track. It's just unfortunate it was driven so far off into the rough in the first place, but he's done a very good job and has been very committed to this. I mean, Manydown, as Councillor Keaton alluded to earlier, I'm also a member of the Manydown map, and I look at the Manydown proposals and they don't seem to bear much relationship to anything we're talking about, so I really wonder why we're wasting our time. And I won't be taking another day off work to attend an all-day meeting to talk about something that no one's taken any notice of. From an Overton point of view, well, despite the flowery language, my residents, those of us who were unfortunate enough to be members of the Conservative Party, were telling me a few years ago that, don't worry, when we're elected, we'll scrap the South East plan, and we won't have to build all the 100 houses we're going to have to build in Overton. Well, they're right there, we're going to have to build 270 now. I mean, funny enough, they don't talk about that anymore. I think they've all given up the will to live in Overton, the Conservatives, but not surprisingly, this is incredibly embarrassing for them there. From the affordable housing point of view, we were presented with a report recently that suggested that 30% affordable housing was all that would be viable around Basingstoke. And that was, they looked at the figures and produced all this, but they didn't need to do. All they had to do was look at the planning applications that have been put in on the sites that are already the subject of appeal. Every developer, Kennel Farm, Kiln Farm, the Overton one, have all put 40% affordable housing in there because they believe that's viable. Well, of course, they believe it's viable because they know that it would be thrown out if they put anything else forward. And the trouble is, if you start giving people this sort of information that this isn't viable or whatever, you can't look that far ahead with viability, and that's the problem with that. It's all a bit vague. So I'm pleased to see as well that's been thrown up. We're back to 40%, but I think as some of the colleagues over there have said, we really need 50%. And one of the ironies was, when you looked at it, if we were going to reduce the amount of affordable housing to 30%, that would have been a net loss of several hundred houses, yet there was no provision in the plan to increase the number to meet the affordable housing needs. So there's no correlation between meeting housing need and the requirements of the SHMA and the amount of houses we're building anyway. They're just used as an excuse, It's just bizarre, we need to actually address this properly. And we need to get back to building, as some of my colleagues have said, build council houses, or we need to fund housing in some way. However we do it, I don't care how it's done, because a lot of people, I'd love everyone to own their own home. I'm like Horace, I don't think people should live in a council house. But the point is, that's the reality, that's all people are going to be, that's the only way they're ever going to get a house. That's how my parents got a house. They wanted to build their own house. They bought the land, they couldn't afford to build the blooming house. So they ended up selling the land. But that's the way it goes. People just don't have the money, and the situation's far worse now. One of the things I would point out on here, I think it's well meant, but there's a proposal in Policy EP4 about not allowing HGVs on C and U roads, not allowing development proposals. Well, there's an obvious problem with that. If I look at my ward, in the last 10 or 12 years since I've been a councillor, I can think of at least 3 or 4 companies in Overton that wouldn't exist if this policy was in place, and they employ collectively about 250 people. And I can understand where he's coming from with it, but I think you've got to be a bit more careful with some of these things. In fact, in Overton, the only factory industrial site that's on the B3400 on any of the B roads is the old Laverstoke Mill, which this council gave planning permission to turn into a massive housing development. Thankfully that went away, and it's now going to become a distillery, but it still will only employ about 20 people instead of about the 200 that were there before they were thrown off the site to allow it to be converted to housing. Whereas even the paper mill in Overton is only on a C road, is on an unclassified road. That only employs about 300 people now, and that's the problem again when you look at this plan, is where are these people going to work? We're going to build loads of houses in the countryside in places like Overton where there's very few employment sites, because we've built houses on a lot of them already. And that was the point. At least in the South East plan, there was some logic that underpinned it, that you would build houses around Basingstoke because that's where the economic need was. This isn't driven by economic need, and certainly from Overton's point of view, it's not driven by housing need in Overton. It's to meet the housing needs of the wider borough. Well, that isn't the way we should be building housing. It isn't sustainable. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Councillor Raphael, to sum up.
Well, Mr. Mayor, can I begin by thanking the officers, Karen Brimacombe, Andrew Hunter, Mark Lambert, Joanne Bromley. They have worked very hard in this process, and I have had to push them very hard, where we know I've said to them things along the lines of, I want it, the members want it, unless it's unlawful or creates a catastrophic problem, let's have it. And sometimes I've given them drafts and they've had to work from things I've put to them. So I want to thank them for working late into the night and meeting me early in the morning. I also want to thank Julia Levy and Bernadette Rennick for all the minutes they've had to take, noting responses ad infinitum, and tonight as well, no doubt. One of my starting points in this process was to aim to inject an element of respect. Respect for me, I respect you, and we all respect the officers. And I think more or less, or if not totally, that has been achieved. I want to just say a little bit about the various contributions, but not all of them. Councillor Harvey was consistent in his approach by saying that he would prefer to see 50% housing, affordable housing target. And I can say, as part of our dialogue, he and Councillor Ms James are very kind to give me some of the material they work from. So I should tell members that certainly on this subject, there was material they were working from, and it was very helpful to see it. And wherever I put it, I have the policy from Wokingham, which said that their target would be 50%. But in relation to greenfields within major development location, for 5 dwellings or more at 0.16 hectares would be 35%, and on greenfield within modest or limited development locations, 5 dwellings or more at 0.16 hectare would be 40%. So whilst, and that's the minimum target. So as they obviously find that it's not necessarily achievable at 50%, and of course we've had a great debate at P&I. If we put a minimum, then the developers will go for the minimum. So I think our policy of 40% with some evidence that seems to support at least 30% is the right way to be. Councillor Gavin James made some good points. A vote against is a vote against planning for future generations, and it's a vote for planning by appeal, and I agree with him entirely about that. I have to say I'm rather worried about Councillor Keating. It's not, I mean, not in a personal sense, just in general terms. He doesn't need to worry about that. I'm not getting overly fond of him. What I'm trying to say is it was he at Cabinet that told the Cabinet what I was doing on Sunday, not me telling him. And because he said that I was working all day on policies inside my house. Now, I didn't, in fact, I had been in the garden on occasions and sort of ran out there, thought, isn't this sunny? Oops, I've forgotten something, I better go back in again. And I didn't see him in the bushes, I didn't see him peeping over the fence, and as far as I'm aware, he definitely wasn't in the house. So I don't know how it is that he was so sure of what I was doing. Can I thank Councillor Potter for his kind comments? Can I thank Councillor Ms James for conceding this, that the plan is rational and lawful, she just wants more. Well, I'll bank rational and lawful, especially the lawful bit, actually. Yeah, and I'm glad you all agree, and I'm glad the Liberals agree with that. I know the Conservatives and the other members agree with that. Can I thank Councillor Tilbury for his kind comments? Can I thank Councillor Keith Watts for his contribution? I was one of those that said to him today, oh, you are here, and he said, well, everyone keeps saying that. I think the K and the G must have got muddled up, for obviously. Because your sanity is on this subject at least, has been wonderful. And your brevity certainly makes up for Councillor Shaw, who the Labour Party probably don't remember. When we were trying to prize a number out of the Labour Party, Councillor Shaw spent about 500 words and then didn't say it. And he said, oh, did you miss it? And I think he got a dig in the ribs from Councillor Shaw, Councillor Watts, and then 748, we're happy with, came out. No digging the ribs. And can I thank you anyway? Can I thank Councillor Gurdon for his kind comments and Councillor Cubitt for hers? And can I just also thank Councillor John Lee? A number of you, and this includes members of the parties opposite, I've used as sounding boards, and I've appreciated that process. I just want to say one thing at the end, if you allow me. One of the things that Councillor Harvey doesn't know is that on his affordable housing policy, with his proposals for hierarchies, I took it seriously. I took out the particular obvious Labour things in it, but ran with a sort of more consensual approach that I thought other members might run with. And I said to the officers, can you make it work? And they gave me a recent analysis how, unfortunately, despite its best intentions, because the committee said we like the idea of hierarchy, it was going to be less strong than the policy we had at the moment. So that's why it's not there. But I think he needs to know that we've taken lots of things seriously, even if not all of them have come out in the final mix.
Thank you, Councillor.
So please support the plan.
Can we have a recorded vote, please?
Okay. Right. Vote. All four. I apologize. Chief Executive.
The Mayor clearly knows I don't like doing recorded votes, but I'll have to, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this is the vote on the 3 recommendations that are set out on the one yellow sheet on the update. Mr. Mayor, I'm taking it because no one said to the contrary that this will be taken as a vote on the 3 parts. So those for, those against and those abstaining, starting with Councillor Barnes. Thank you. Councillor Miss Bean. Councillor Beerman. Councillor Bound. Councillor Mrs Burgess. Councillor Ms Cherrett. Councillor Mrs Court. Councillor Cousins. Councillor Mrs Cubitt. Councillor Day. Councillor Donnell. Councillor Dunlop. Councillor Massechus. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Mrs Frankham. Councillor Frankham. Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gollison. Councillor Golding. Councillor Gurdon. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Hood. Councillor Hussey. Councillor Isaac. Councillor Ms James. Councillor James. Councillor J. Wardner. Councillor Keating. Councillor Leek. Councillor Leeks. Councillor Miller. Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Musson. Councillor Mrs Ossleton. Councillor Parker. Councillor Peach. Councillor Potter. Councillor Putty. 4. Councillor Regan. Councillor Round. Councillor Raffel. Councillor Sanders. Councillor Shaw. Councillor Sherlock. Councillor Mrs Still. Councillor Mrs Taylor. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Tilbury. Councillor Tomlin. Councillor Mrs Tucker. Councillor Ms Washbourne. Councillor Watts. Councillor West. And Councillor Mrs Wardridge. Thank you.
Quiet, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The vote for is 35, against 16, with 3 abstentions. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
It's clearly carried. Now, I have no notices of motion. I've got a question in accordance with FCPR 3.18. Councillor Cousins.
As per the order paper, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The short answer is yes, as far as it's possible for me and the portfolio holder to do so. I mean, clearly this has to be subject to budget approval, and it's only proper, as we're spending council taxpayers' money, that there should be a full and thorough analysis, both looking at the practical issues, the good things, and the points for improvement, which I'm sure there are some. And also, I think, looking at the outcomes. What do we gain as a result of having Basingstoke Live? What more do we want to achieve? And that might give us an indication of what other things we might be doing with it and could be added onto it. I don't think any of us would actually believe it's reasonable to go out and spend something over £100,000 worth of residents' funds on and do nothing more than just have a good time. There has to be a little bit more to it than that. So I think it is very appropriate that this, the last Basingstoke Live, should be looked at again by the MAP and reviewed by them, and then onward to Ofcom for a proper and thorough discussion on the subject in September. But my intention is that we will see Basingstoke Live in 2014, and I have asked officers to make provision in the budget so that that can be the case.
Thank you. Any supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Leader, for giving a positive answer in saying that, yes, indeed, you and the portfolio would like to see Basingstoke Live again for 2014. My supplementary question is, yes, I appreciate and acknowledge that a review must be had. My question relates to the budget. The budget isn't approved until next February. And Basingstoke Live, as well as the festival, must start early in order to progress and get better year by year by year. So my question to the Leader is, will he at least provide some provision to start putting aside now so that both these items can go ahead for 2014 and flourish as well as we want them to do?
Councillor Sanders.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think I probably answered that, is that I cannot spend money next year before the council has decided on what the budget for next year should be. And that is just not possible. That said, I have made a very clear statement to officers that we should put a full funding allowance into our budget planning on the basis that it will take place, and we will be having the feedback from the review in September, so we should have a pretty good early sight of where we are going. So I think that's trying to be as positive as I possibly can, but you've got to realise that unfortunately you haven't given me total megalomaniac power to run everything, at least not yet you haven't.
Thank you. To receive en bloc the minutes for report.
The only one is a cabinet minute.
It's a cabinet one, which is on the 22nd of July 2013. Councillor Lake, John Lake.
Mr. Mayor, as I made clear earlier on, I don't think the minutes fully reflect what I actually said at that meeting, and I hope that they can be amended to note that I was concerned about the isolation of the new Manydown estate and that there should be integration with Winklebury, and I would be grateful if that could be fully recorded. Thank you.
Is that agreed? Well, Councillor Potter.
Mr. Mayor, I wonder if it would be in order just to, through you, ask Councillor Golding what has changed since Monday evening when he was unable to support the local plan, and tonight he's able to support it.
No, Councillor Potter, sorry. Councillor Keating.
Mr. Mayor, at the risk of damaging my reputation, could I indicate that having been at the Cabinet meeting on Monday, that what Councillor Leake has said is 100% accurate, and I too would support him in having the minutes amended. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's agreed. Thank you very much indeed, councillors, for an orderly debate, and thank you very much indeed. 9:15.